Most people are not practicing spirituality. They're just collecting new labels to feed their ego. But you're not ascended, awakened, or high vibration. You're just a human being sitting in a room. And until you can accept that, you're missing the whole point. Maybe you are somebody who does spiritual practice, who inquires and meditates. And in the past, you have had experiences like insights, awakenings, or maybe one big awakening that change the way you now see yourself and your environment and how you perceive reality. And then usually what happens is that people either want to get back to that experience because it seems to be lost or disconnected, or people want to integrate their new insight into their daily life. And that goes rather difficult. But here's the thing. Spiritual insights or revelations or satoris or awakening, whatever you want to call that, when there is a connection between you and everything else, where your consciousness kind of comes to the surface, that is an experience that the mind can never grasp. The mind has nothing to do with it. So when you have an experience like that, and later on, your mind comes back in, your person, your ego comes back in, that's very normal. So our brains have almost 100 billion neurons. And those 100 billion neurons make connections with one another. They form patterns. And those patterns are the concepts that we live by. So if you know how to drive a car, then you don't have to put a lot of effort in driving a car. That's because you have the neurological circuitry to drive a car. The same happens with our sense of self. It all happens automatic. We have a whole pattern which we call our life. And so even if you have an insight, even if you have a moment of clarity, then that pattern is still there. So it will kick back in. And so in this pattern, there is a me that has formed. So a mentally created me. And so the mentally created me is per definition cut off from everything because it is a mental pattern that is, reflecting back on itself. So that mental me then tries to unify with everything. And that is completely impossible to do. So from the point of view of the mind, you can never get back into that state. Also because that state is not a state at all. It is something which is here right now. And you're living it here right now. But it might not be apparent because of this superposition of a mentally created self on top of it. So the spiritual practice is not to get into a certain experience, but it is very, very simply to expand presence. That which is here right now, presence, can be expanded. And when presence is expanded, it pushes away time. And time is mind. So presence pushes away time, it pushes away mind, and therefore it pushes away the entity living in mind, the mind-created self, the ego. And when that happens, this is true spiritual practice, you see. When presence is expanded, spiritual practice is happening. And when spiritual practice happens, your own consciousness comes to the foreground and expands. And that is the true learning curve, you see. This is the way that the mind and the body and your world gets conditioned, get primed by your higher consciousness. This is the way it works. When your consciousness expands, your mind changes, your body changes, and your world changes. So from the point of view of the mind, that can never happen. The mind says, what can I do to become more? But it will never happen because the mind itself is that which is in the way. So the only thing to do is to expand presence. Pushes away time and it reveals, so it brings forth, it brings to the foreground your higher consciousness, your expanded consciousness. And that primes the mind and the body. And that is true spiritual practice. And therefore maybe it can be very logical to see that when the mind holds concepts like I have awakened in the past, or I have had those amazing experiences, or even when me, so when you self-reference, if you say I can place myself somewhere on the slider of awakening. So I'm awakened or I'm not awakened. That is always a mind identity. So an identity of the self. Because when we see ourselves as separate entities, mind-created selves, so egos, then whether you are a spiritual person or not, we always identify with things. And when you're into spirituality, then you identify maybe with being awakened or having had experiences and so on. And you try to navigate those experiences, but that's what the ego always does. No matter if the ego is involved in spirituality or not, the ego always has problems, difficulties, challenges, because it lives a dual world. That's just the nature of it. And when the ego is identified with spiritual awakening, then that becomes its issue. That becomes its thing to tackle. The ego wants to become, the ego wants to be able to function in the world with its awakening. If somebody tells you that they are awakened, then that is a telltale sign that they're not. Because a person, an I, can never be awakened. Awakening is the ending of that person, and it's the ending of time. So therefore, I am awakened is an illusion. So again, the way you integrate this, because of course, if you've had experiences like this, it has an effect on how you are right now. But you can never solve those things, and you don't have to. That's just a dream. What you need to do is expand presence without any concepts. Because if you hold concepts, then you cannot expand presence, because the concepts keep you stuck. If you hold ideas about yourself as an awakened person or something like that, or on a spiritual path, on a spiritual journey, then those concepts keep the ego, the identification with form and time, in place. And nothing happens. But when you are right here, right now, in the beginning it stings a little bit. It's like, because there's nothing to gain, nothing to get. But once you go over that little threshold of like, it's like you don't have that gain anymore. But once you go over that little threshold, you can just expand the now. And then the me is not there. And that expansion is actually integrating your mind in the world. So your mind identity, your identity with self, your identity with your mind and your body, which is part of being human, gets reconditioned by consciousness itself. You don't have to do that. The mind does not have to do anything about integration in the world. There are always challenges for the mind. And when consciousness expands, then you get your own set of challenges, which is always unique to you. But the consciousness itself, so your own consciousness, will show you or will guide your mind, prime your mind into integration into your world. It reshapes your world, your body and your mind. You do not have to do that. You do not have to integrate yourself or your awakening into your life. The only thing you need to do is expand your consciousness. So expand the presence in your life. Just right here, right now. Do like this. Like you cut through space, you cut through time, and then you open up. What's left? What's here? This. There's no mind there. There's no time. There's no me. That expanded consciousness is just like the base of you. It's like you in depth. Because those layers of mind and body and world are like superpositions or like superficial layers of you. When you just let those go, or when you don't pay attention to them, you go into the depth of you. And that depth is actually controlling or dominating those lower realms. But when you're stuck in the lower realms, then it feels like you need to manage everything. But you don't. Those things get managed by the deeper layers of yourself. So the only thing you have to do is expand presence in your life. Isn't that simple? Expanding presence and letting go of all the labels that keep you attached to the story of yourself.